Ready to go? Okay. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's a meeting of the Seldovia City Council, Monday, May 8th, 2023. Time is 4:01 p.m. This is a work session. And tonight's topics will be Seldovia space will be topic B1, and then B2 will be the Seldovia Permanent Fund discussion with the Alaska Permanent Capital Management Company. That'll be around 4:30 when we've got a speaker that's going to call in. So Heidi, we'll go ahead and kick it off with the Seldovia space to start.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this came about, we've had a few recent discussions over the last year about Seldovia space, including during the last budget cycle where or fiscal year when it was included into the fee schedule and for FY23 and then removed from the fee schedule for in October of FY23 during an amendment. The city has been operating under a previous administrative rate schedule that was implemented in 2021. And you can see that is on page 6 of your packet. That has been proposed to be implemented in the FY24 packet. And then we also have some long-term lease tenants that are scheduled for the renewal of their lease by resolution at tonight's meeting. The Seldovia space came up again in discussion during this fiscal year budget and at the first meeting in April, when the fee schedule was discussed. That's when it was discussed that these rates would be incorporated into the fee schedule and that leases and short-term rentals would be treated separately per our resolution. I don't know that I have that number right off the top of my head. No, that's the ordinance. That leases through the city or for leases of city offices are done by resolution and approved by city council. So that'll be on tonight's agenda for the regular meeting. But for now, during that budget discussion, it was suggested that this come back as a topic for the council, just as an overall consideration of the future of that space. You can see in your packet that we do have that ordinance 1911 along with the schematics of the building that follow that on page 5. We did have an open house just prior to this meeting so that any council members or members of the public that wanted to come through and see the place in person could. But there's a map if you weren't able to. And then the application and rates that we use follow, along with initial advertisement that we utilized in end of 2019, beginning of 2020 for the conception of the Seldovia space for that office sharing, as well as rates that are what is being currently used on page 12 for the proposed schedule. And last thing I'll add in is that I was thinking about this weekend and I wasn't sure what information the council wanted to proceed with in this discussion, but I did think that probably part of it, because it's budget related, is just seeing how that space is doing. And so I was able to pull up the overall dimensions of the building per the Kenai Peninsula Borough, and the overall building itself. This is as a separate supplemental. Hopefully you guys all received it. If you didn't, we have a copy here. The overall building space itself is 11,648 square feet. And Seldovia space is 2,436 square feet, or about 20% of the overall building. And, as a department, we have 7 departments that operate out of this space, including police, fire, EMS, council chambers, senior meals, library, and Seldovia space. So the utilities for the building are not separated by meters. It's just 1 meter for the whole building. And prior to the FY23 budget, and FY22 was amended, that budget prior to that, this building was separated out by those departments. So there was a portion that goes to senior meals, and there's still a small portion that goes to senior meals, a portion that went to council, a portion to police, portion to library, and a portion to the clinic, because it was the clinic space. Since then, it's been they've been all added in together and allocated together as one fund for the whole building, which shows that overall expenses are about $60,000 a year. So, if you do the math on that, it's about 13,000 for that space. It doesn't quite cut even budget wise. However, even if nobody was in there or we utilizing it differently, the cost would be maybe not the same, but there would definitely still be some heat and electricity associated. The internet is now consolidated into one. So that price wouldn't change whether there was tenants in there or not. So with that, I would leave it over to council just to see what your guys' thoughts are. One last thing is that the 2 long-term leases that are on tonight's schedule or regularly scheduled meeting are for a 1-year term with 4 consecutive terms for renewal. So if that's not something that council wants to see move forward, definitely let me know. We can work on negotiating that and changing that in the resolution of the contract. The reason why we went with that date is because both tenants were interested in seeing a longer term lease. Currently in their expired leases, they have first right to refusal and the right to renew. During negotiations and discussion with them in the new lease, if executed after tonight's meeting, those 2 terms would be removed. Instead, they would have the 1 year with 4 additional years that would self-execute unless there's a 90 days clause, unless the city of Seldovia or the tenant themselves said in writing that they no longer wanted to use the space, which was not something that was in there either. So it does change it a little bit, but it gives them that space for a long term. I said I couldn't guarantee anything past that. Not that I can guarantee that either. It's up to you guys in the long run, but that I know that the city and the council have had discussion recently about what the long-term plan is after 5 years. We're held as a public space right now through this grant process, so that could be reevaluated at that time. But that's what I have, and I would love to hear from the council.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Yeah, we can go ahead and open it up for just general discussion, whatever your guys' thoughts are. Kind of hearing what the groundwork was, what the intent was, and where we're headed and what you guys think. Go ahead, John.
I don't really think a whole lot, to be honest with you. Today's the first chance I had to even really go down there. I haven't been through the building before, other than when they conducted a sale over here. I run through there real briefly, looking at what was for sale and split, so I really didn't have a lay of the land, but I found it kind of interesting today. And I don't know really what our goal is for long-term goal is, but I know we've had some discussions about possibly moving the city over here after that 5 years. And I'm just wondering, with some of those lease extensions, wouldn't they be in our way if we were to choose that option? I'm not saying that I'm pushing for that. I'm just thinking, are we going to have an option, with our long-term tenants, is that going to get in the way of that? I don't know.
Through the mayor.
Yep.
So through the lease as they're written now, and both tenants have seen it, they would be able to be executed after this tonight's meeting if they're approved. So starting May, I had May 15th as the date, but whatever they're both signed off on, and that's 5 years. So they would go through the May of 2028. And that building's public purpose is set through the end of that fiscal year. So they would be about a month before that 5 year
I'm not saying that.
Oh.
I'm not saying that that's anything that I'm pushing for. I have no idea. I just would like that option to be there for us, I don't know.
Yeah. They would either have to be renegotiated at that time, or we would evaluate the space and have that discussion. And it's right in line with when that discussion with the grant would be.
The other thing I have to say is, it's going to be interesting to see the benefits of the new improvements, especially the heating system, and being able to control the temperatures to see if we see any benefits for cost that way. That'll be nice to see when that, once we get through a year, we see where we're at, if there's been any, benefit to that as well. All I have.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead,
Yeah.
Bobby.
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty happy with the way things have been going there. When we first, established this, we were all kind of, well, what's going to happen? But I think we've done, pretty good with it. It's generated a little bit of income. Like you say, otherwise, if it was empty, we'd have to pay utilities and stuff anyway. So I'm happy with the way it turned out, the way it looks. And it's giving the opportunity for some folks in town, who can't afford or can't even get a place for some of the things that like Kate and Caleb and the other guys, gives them an opportunity to have a business. So I'm happy with the way it's gone. And it's good that the whole thing works out for the 5-year thing. In case we do decide at a later date, I know we've thrown it around once and, I'm sure we're going to throw it around again. So, that the timing works out good. And I like the year lease and then the 4 other ones, because I think kind of sort of lately, since we've established Seldovia space, not that they've got forgotten, but I think they've kind of been out of sight, out of mind, collect the rent and blah, blah, blah. So I think this gives us an opportunity to hear what they have to say about it on a yearly basis. And I think the communication aspect of it is going to be much better. So I'm happy about that. So all in all, I think it's a good deal and I think we should move forward with that. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Anyone else?
If I may,
Yes, go ahead, Ashley.
I'm pretty much going to be just agreeing with both of these guys. As they said, it's going to be there anyways. I mean, there might be a little bit more heat or so, but that might be fine now that we've had our improvements. And since we have to utilize that space in a way like that for the next 5 years. And I know that the front space is going to be occupied this summer. Are there any empty spaces? I know I just walked through the building, but
Through the mayor, so there's the day room and then the conference area.
That's right.
And once that front space is
Mhm.
occupied, that space will be for 3 months. And then we had a tenant move into the space on the opposite side of the front. And they were thinking at least 3 or 4 months, but they don't have a set time yet. So it will be filled for the summer.
I would say if I just had one ask with the space as we move forward is maybe coming up with like a periodical plan of just kind of making sure that the community remembers that the space is there and what it's available for, including that conference space and just to really try to pull any opportunity of using that space to help the community, because they might forget that it's there for something that in that moment when they're thinking they need space, and then every little bit will help over that next 5 years of bringing that in and having that 90-day annual after the first year is really important for both parties, I think, with kind of the fluidity of the space. So yeah, I think you guys did a great job.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Jennifer, anything you wish to add?
No.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll just chime in real quick. Yeah, I think what we're doing, I'm fine with status quo here, small, reasonable, increases or changes to the lease provisions, and then certainly the 1-year renewals going up with the long-term goal of making sure that, that for future councils that, you know, if they want to do something, I'm certainly in favor at some point of moving our administration over to this building. We are in kind of a unique position with being able to offer a space like that for a smaller community and actually get revenue for it. So it's a pretty good deal. Granted, it's not, I mean, it's not a moneymaker, but it's, you know, it's helping defray the expenses, you know, which we'd otherwise be on the hook for all in. So no, I think you guys did a good job. If the new tenants are happy, the city's happy, then I think we just move forward with this plan, and then we'll revisit it annually as these leases are, even, I know they're going to automatically renew if nothing's brought up, but maybe we just plan on having it as an agenda item just to update the council, you know, from year to year, what our occupancy is. And I'm sure in your, you know, report, if things change with new tenants or whatever, you know, you'll give us an update. So yeah, no, I'm good with that. We can go ahead and go to the public. If anyone from the public wishes to weigh in. We are short on public in the building tonight. Looks like we're fairly short online as well. Seeing none. All right. Yeah, any other closing, anything else on that topic? Good. Okay. All right. Well, that takes care of that item. Thanks for going through that and working with our tenants on that. Yeah, are we waiting for him to call in? Were you gonna call?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Blake Phillips with APCM was planning on joining us at 4:30. We could probably just start the discussion ahead of time. That way, if
Yeah.
you guys have topics you want to mention to him, then that would work, or we can wait. Either way, I think is fine.
Yeah, we can go ahead and, I mean, if there's anything we want to get started with, what page is that going to start on? 13?
Yes, so this also came about in the budget discussion. And we will have a full review of our Charles Schwab account with APCM here as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. Blake wasn't prepared to do that this evening, knowing that there aren't any potential changes to the goals right now, the long-term longevity of the account. So it'll be more just focused on our strategies moving forward with it. At this time, the discussion will be based on the two pockets of funds that are sitting outside of the account, or the one pocket and then potential future pocket. If you look on page 13, this is our proposed budget for FY24 with those reserve accounts. And you can see in FY23 that 500,000 was moved into Charles Schwab, and that is the Seldovia Permanent Fund. There was a little bit more in principal that was left in AMLIP and as a safety in case the city needed to access those funds. And that's an additional $41,721. It has gained some, and I apologize, I did not put the finance report in there. It has gained some interest over the last year, which has been nice because for years and years it wasn't gaining any interest. But we are seeing some. And then, of course, is some interest for the Charles Schwab account, but it's that one. According to our finance officer and just seeing the reports we received them, it seems to be a little bit more volatile right now. It's moving up and down quite a bit with what's happening in the current markets. But so that was the question is, do these funds stay in this AMLIP account where they do accrue interest, but they are more easily accessible, or do they go into the bigger account, which has been dedicated for the next 10 years and would be much harder to liquidate, as well as Councilmember Swick brought up that we have a repayment due for the kiosks, and that was 30,000 that was drawn from the permanent fund for those kiosks, with the intent to pay back with the 3%. So we're looking at about $30,900 to pay back overall for those. Right now, the way the budget draft looks for the regular meeting, doesn't necessarily show in the ending fund balance that money is available because of the way that the police budget is sitting in there. However, I do have faith with the, once the FY22 audit has been complete, those ending fund balances will be changed and we can revisit the discussion at any point and then pass it by resolution, would be saying we're putting that money back or through council direction. But just thinking in terms of those two pockets of money and whether council wants to see those utilized overall as part of the Seldovia Permanent Fund principle that's in Charles Schwab, or to hold them in the AMLIP account in case there's an event that the city needs access to funds within the next 10 years, a little bit quicker or more than what we have for our permanent fund, or not our permanent fund, sorry, our major maintenance and repair fund, which we have been spending a little bit out of the last couple of years for harbor repairs, is being utilized. But I have a feeling that account will start filling back up as she's getting out of the deficit in the next year. And then we did utilize some for the dock this year in the budget for the approach. So I'll leave that up to council and just get your ideas on it. It looks like Councilmember Payton was able to join us. And then I'm sure when Blake joins us, he can talk more about those pockets of money as well and what he recommends.
Okay, thanks Heidi for the overview. Yeah, while we're waiting for Blake to join, we can just open it up if there's any initial thoughts you guys have on the funds, where they're sitting, and if we want to, where we want to, we want them to stay status quo or move anything around, or what your thoughts are. So. Well, we know you do, John. We might as well just go first.
I think this one's gonna surprise you. I actually I'd like to just leave it where it's at. And I, with the exception of whatever was agreed upon with the payment, if that was, even if some of that payment could be made, but I'm okay with leaving it sit for another year just because of the chief funding and the money we're gonna be putting aside for that. Let's see if we actually are able to put it away over the next year, you know what I mean? Then I'd feel more comfortable about having some type of emergency reserve for the community. Certainly it's up to the whole council. I mean, I think if it was 6 months ago, I'd have probably said, no, let's get it back in there, but the market is pretty volatile right now, and I don't know. Yeah, I'd be okay with just leaving it for another year. But I'd like to hear what the rest of them have to say too.
Okay, yep. Thanks, John. Anyone else? I'm not calling on her yet.
Who, me?
Yes. What's your thoughts? Since you chimed in.
Yeah, like I said, I'd like to see that 30,000 be put back in if we can do that. I still feel like this setting aside of the police budget is a smart thing, but I'm really hoping that we don't need to tap into that money, that, this VPSO situation is going to work out. So I'd like to have that go in there, and then, yeah, leave the, whatever the 40 that's left, leave that for another year, and decide later how to put that in. I know we had left it out to have it more easily accessible, but I know we say we can't touch it, but we can. It's just really not recommended, and we'd have to do it via resolution or something, because the APCM won't take it unless they get something official from council. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, I believe so, and that's a great question for when Blake comes on. When speaking with him last week, he did mention that there are potential penalties with that as well. So that's a great question
Oh,
for him if we
That was
start.
Sorry. That was my other question was, are we going to be penalized if we do take, I mean, I don't want to take the money back out, but you know, if something, I don't want to say terrible happens, but push comes to shove and we need to pull money out of that we decide to put in, it would be unfortunate to have to pay a bunch of penalties on it. Because before I almost thought he said there wasn't, it's just you're not going to make the money. It's not why you're putting it in there is to keep it in there. Because it wouldn't be, I mean, I would hope that we would have a resolution anyway or something, even to take the money out of the AMLIP account, you know, instead of just, we wanted to make that all very transparent, whether we use that money from anywhere. But that'll be good to hear from Blake about what that will, how that will affect that account if we ever did have to take that money out. But yes. But the, yeah, I would like to put that 30 back in when possible and then leave that extra 40 out at this time and then see what happens in the next year, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So Heidi, so just jog my memory here. If the 30 is gonna, if council chooses to grab 30 to pay that back, where does that come from?
The general fund.
Comes from the general fund.
Right.
Okay, and then it would go into Charles Schwab.
And that would be up to council.
Okay.
So if you wanted it, the Seldovia fund sits in two places right now. One is the Charles Schwab account and the other is the AMLIP account.
Right. Or so it could go in the AMLIP account as
Yeah.
well. Okay, it could go in either.
Yeah, because they're both Seldovia fund principal. They're just
Okay.
been separated out.
Okay. And it would come out of the general fund. Okay. Okay,
Mr. Mayor, and it does look like
Oh.
Blake has been able to join us.
perfect.
Hi, Blake.
Hi there.
So just to catch you up to speed, we got done with our previous conversation a little bit early, and so we kind of jumped in on this one, and we are talking about the city having two pools of funds, potentially principal funds, that just what the deciding factor is for utilizing those in the coming year. One being the Seldovia permanent fund principal that was not placed into Charles Schwab, and that's that $41,721 that we left in the AMLIP account. And then the other being $30,900 with the 3% interest for the Seldovia kiosks that were utilized for a development project that we owe back. And we've had a couple council members weigh in, but I know they have a couple of questions, and I will leave that to the council.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. Yeah, so I don't know, if there's, unless there's specific questions, do we want to just jump in and have Blake give us kind of an overview of how everything works and what any of the repercussions, benefits, or not?
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of talk about that a little bit. Heidi and I discussed it a little bit, and I think it's very healthy to have these conversations, and it's good. I'm glad we're kind of going over this. When we manage money for public entities, we often talk about it in different buckets of money. And so by that, the different buckets, just as if we were, managing money to, let's call one bucket payroll and one bucket, permanent fund, like really long-term goals. To be able to effectively manage, accomplish the goals for each of those, which are going to be quite different, you're going to have to use different investment strategies. And so that's essentially what you have set up right now is with your AMLIP account is a very short-term, very safe investment where there's never been a case where people have not been able to withdraw their money at par, which is dollar for dollar. in the AMLIP through the financial crisis and everything. So that is an extremely good way to have short-term funds be invested. You're earning somewhere between 4.5% and 5% on those funds right now. That is at the whim of what short-term interest rates do. So we're pretty much at the end of the hiking period. This is probably the highest we're going to see AMLIP yield, in the intermediate term here. And we'll probably be seeing that roll back over. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the permanent fund, and that's meant for the perpetual good of the citizens of Seldovia. And right now we're trying to grow it, not in a draw period yet, but trying to grow it so that it can become, potential budgetary support in the future or for potential special projects, however you deem fit to use it. But the idea being that is not going to be like a savings account where you're going to have money going in and out on a regular basis. In order for it to be successful, you have to stick with the investment plan. There is a sustainable draw level that you can have, but it's important, I think, to set the mindset that when you put money into the permanent fund, it's not just, if say that $30,000 that I think is, under question whether that should go in or not. I think that the best answer for that is looking at what liquidity needs you might have on that cash. So if that $30,000 might be needed in 6 months, 12 months, something along those lines, I don't think that the appropriate parking place is the permanent fund. I very much applaud trying to get money into the permanent fund and grow that because it is a long-term benefit. But at the same time, you don't want to be put in a position where you're forced to kind of go against all of the rules that have been laid out and created for the permanent fund and have to withdraw money because you, kind of got maybe a little bit too enthusiastic and put too much in too early. And so I'm not trying to dissuade you from putting that money in, but I really think that the liquidity needs, if you may need that money in the short or medium term, that's probably not the right bucket to put it into.
Okay, that that seems to definitely make sense. So we can open it back up. If there's any additional questions or comments for Blake? Okay. Yeah, we need to. Harmony or Jennifer, you guys got any additional questions?
Yeah, sorry. Well, first of all, I'm fine with putting the 30 into AMLIP. I guess I didn't even think about that being an option. I was just wanting to solve that problem of us owing the permanent fund that 30. If everybody wants to put it in the AMLIP account, that's totally fine. I just like to do that. And then maybe I missed this because I'm walking in and out. Blake, did you touch on if we ever did have to withdraw money? I know it's not ideal. Are there penalties to that pulling out of the Charles Schwab account?
So there's no penalty from Schwab nor from APCM. But there are two other things I think you have to think about. And so you're not supposed to draw into principal. So with the youngness of the fund, you would be kind of dipping into principal, which goes against the guidelines of the fund. And then the other piece, and probably the more important piece, why I really stress kind of looking at liquidity, is in seeking higher returns in the permanent fund, you're exposed to more volatility. So when you see the stock market going up and down, the permanent fund is going to be much more exposed to that, whereas AMLIP is not exposed to it at all. And so when we look at that from a liquidity standpoint, say you put $50,000 into the permanent fund now, and we had a bad year and the market went down 10%. Now you're in the place of still needing to withdraw that $50,000, but it's a very inopportune time to do so. And so That's why we don't want any funds for liquidity needs that might be needed in kind of the shorter intermediate term to be exposed to too much risk. And so those are the things that really, I think, one, you want to have be consistent with the rules that are set out by the permanent fund and not withdrawing above the sustainable draw rate, which is going to be around 4% of the average market value. Because that is something that is able to be done. But I think that the idea was this being in growth phase right now and trying to grow it to something more substantial. But if you put that 50, but what I don't want to see is that 40 go in and then be in that situation. It's just not a risk that I would recommend you guys taking. But if the monies are not something that's going to be needed, I think it's a very good idea. But I think that that's the framework that you should be thinking of it within.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think putting that money in the AMLET account is a much better situation for us, since we're not exactly on 100% solid ground yet in our budget. We couldn't use that money if we have to, and we shouldn't even be thinking about pulling anything out of the Charles Schwab, geez, that's a tongue twister thing, account, unless, we have like some kind of, the sky's falling in on us or something. So I think it's much better for us to move that money into AMLET than to even think about putting it in the other account.
Thanks, Bobby. Yeah, and just understanding and listening to what Blake said, and then, based on some comments from Jennifer and Bobby here too. Yeah, I mean, looking at a long-term strategy, I guess we look at the permanent fund, being how it's set up now is somewhat diverse, right? We've got 525 long-term, or let's call it 500 long-term, and the 40-ish in the short term that is very liquid. The long-term not liquid, if you will, and not meeting our goals if we do start pulling out of that. Maybe what we look at is doing exactly that. Get to a point in the future here where we're building up our AMLET fund, and then as we year to year here, our budgets, everything is getting better. The city is getting more financially stable. Let's just say we hit 100 or whatever that magic number is in our AMLET amount, and a number that we're comfortable with having liquid. And then as we start to, fund that, and we see some of these other MMR funds also get to where they need to be, then we start looking at excess at that point, moving that over into the Charles Schwab account. But always making sure that we've got some level of liquidity in the event of an emergency or any kind of a disaster. So, Blake, would that be kind of that fairly accurate on maybe the right thought process?
I think it's exactly right thought process. And, oftentimes the way I describe it is you kind of have, I mentioned buckets earlier. And if you start out at your lowest risk bucket, which is going to be checking, you make sure you have enough checking in your checking to pay the bills, have some left over so you're not bouncing checks or anything like that. And then excess of whatever that number is in your checking should be going over into AMLET, where you're actually getting paid for that money, but it's still easily transferable back same day. And so that's an easy one. And then once you get beyond AMLET, whether you mentioned another reserve, but say you have another reserve fund that is next. So once the AMLET bucket is filled up, and you kind of got to pick out what these amounts are, oftentimes people do checking, we'll say, 2 or 3 months, and then above that, then they have AMLET, and it's whatever they want that number to be. But once those lower buckets get filled to where they need to be, then you move out to the next buckets, and that excess cash can go there. And that prevents you, once you have those lower levels filled up, as you're speaking to, then you decide to do what to do with that excess. But you don't want to be in a position of having to pull back funds from the other end of the spectrum to fill those lower buckets, because it comes with more risk. And so as much as I'd like to see, I think it's good for the community to have that permanent fund get as big as it can. You want to make sure that it's done in a prudent manner.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice because yeah, obviously we don't want to sacrifice our day-to-day needs, while we get this big savings account rolling, sacrificing some of our day-to-day needs. So I think that's a good strategy. I like what I'm hearing from everybody, certainly what Blake's telling us. I think it's consistent for what we need to, basically just grow our future here. So,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
yep, go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, and I think we need to remember what this fund originally started out at and what it is now. I mean, it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't just, keep using money from it, thinking we're going to replenish it, and then we don't. And pretty soon, we started out, at almost $1 million. Now we've got 500 and, it could diminish very quickly if we keep borrowing. And yes, the idea is to replace it, but obviously that didn't always happen for whatever reason. So I think it's a good idea what we did. We made a smart move. We did the right move. And yeah, so we'll just have to sit on that money. Like I said before, had we done this 10 years ago when we were already talking about it, first time, we'd be sitting a lot prettier than we are now, but we've moved forward now, and I think we've done a good thing. So thanks.
And if I could just comment, I would also like to amplify kind of something what you're saying is by treating it this way and using that, like not borrowing, like kind of going to the kitty to do whatever is kind of on the most near term, it established, when you don't do that and you establish that precedent of behavior for, future councils and everything, I think that really speaks strongly too, because if there isn't that voice who said, well, 3 years ago, we pulled some out and then repaid it back. It's a slippery slope. Absolutely. And I think that, the more the precedent can be set where there's not examples of kind of going against the main goals of this fund, the more successful it'll be over time.
Yeah, I think that's good advice too. So for sure. Awesome. All right. Any other final comments on that before we go to public? Okay, no additional public members have joined, I see. Okay. All right, well, Blake, thanks for calling in. We appreciate your time. Yeah,
Absolutely.
kind of short and sweet tonight. Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward that we need to just kind of follow that guideline or that path. Look at our AMLIP funds as more shorter term, and then stay away from that permanent fund in the Charles Schwab, unless we're putting in and not taking out. So yeah, no, that's good. This will help shape some future conversations here around final budgets, any surpluses, anything we want to do, and then we'll go that direction. So all right, well, I appreciate it, Blake. Thanks for your info.
Yep.
And insight, and yeah,
and this is also, a very common, just like as you're going through your budgeting process, I would say like lots of other municipalities, this is when they're usually, they will make decisions on special contributions outside of it, but kind of contribution and draw conversation. And this is when it should be happening too, is kind of when you're doing your budgeting process. And so anytime I'm more than happy to make myself available when you guys are having these kind of conversations and you'd like any of our view, more than happy to provide that. And just a reminder, I'll be seeing you guys at the end of June to go over the investment portfolio more in depth.
Great. Yeah, I look forward to that. So appreciate your time tonight.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor Campbell,
Yeah, go ahead.
I got a couple quick questions
Yeah.
for you and Heidi, really. The AMLIT income annually, it's just a few percent that we're receiving on that, right?
Yeah, he said 4.5 to 5 right now with the recent rates.
Right. But we could choose to put the interest every year into that account, correct? It's kind of nitpicky, but I was just thinking it was an idea. And then the other reason I was in favor of waiting, I like what the plan is here. I really do. But the other reason I was thinking about waiting is some of the emergency issues we have, you know, that, and I'm not at the forefront of all of those. I know we have lists of them, but I can think of the roof, you know, concerns me and our liability with it. I was completely against a trash truck, but after what I seen today, we need to do something about that trash truck. The liability for our employees working for us and the stuff they're picking up and trying to put in the back of a pickup. And then I wonder if there's any of those issues around the community that if we were able to fix it with a little extra money down the road, once we see this VPSO deal works out and maybe we have some extra money from the chief budget, is there some project that might be revenue generating that we could fix that we haven't had the money to fix? That's the stuff
Yeah,
I was
that's a
thinking
good
about.
point.
So what I'm just right off the top of my head would be the meters in the boatyard. And I'm just being straight up with you. Our old boat's going to the boatyard as soon as I can, and I'd really love to have the power, just as a community member, to be able to fix it. And so I see a benefit for that, for us to be able to fix some of that infrastructure over the next couple of years. I will have no idea what that would cost, but maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe there's some other issues that would be revenue generating for us, that we could essentially get our money back if we were able to fix the stuff.
Yeah, that's a good thought process for sure.
That's where I was at with the whole thing, is I'm thinking about, and I know there's other projects. You know, I seen a couple of things in here that, you know, that I think could even make it better, but man, this has come a long ways, you know, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so the only thing I thought about was maybe the interest, you know, but maybe it's not enough to even mess with our time, you know, but anyway.
Yeah, at some point though, we'll hopefully get that to a point where we can start transferring the other direction, which would be nice. So
It'd be nice to get down the road 3 or 4 years here and find out that this VPSO is going to work out and we're going to benefit from all these decisions.
yeah, I think it's coming. So
Yeah.
Ashley, did you have something to add?
I do know, yeah. A lot of it, I'm just going,
Yeah.
okay. And I was like, I don't want to just be redundant. So I'll be quiet. But you kind of brought everything to the end, and where my budgeting brain started to come in, listening to you guys that have been working on this before me. And it just, to me, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but we just need to come up with, I use the bucket analogy, but that buffer fund, whatever you want it to be, that we're in a place that if we are now thinking that we might have some money that we're at first thinking, oh, it should go into this fund and make us more money, is having that, picking a number. And that number can always change, but right now it sounds like we need a number that needs to be what we're trying to reach in that AMLIP account that have there. And then whether it's interest or wherever that, it doesn't matter where that money came from. If it's above that number, then we can have that, that's the discussion of, is there things that we need to be spending? And this is the exciting part. It sounds like we haven't been in this position to be like, there's money to do things with, that you can start to do that once you've gotten past that. Your bucket is now overflowed. So that needs to go somewhere else. And then we can have that discussion on fixing something, or saying 25% of that is, even if it is a small amount, I'm all about that you stick to the rule you set. And if you say 25% is always going to go, that's overflowing from that bucket to Charles Schwab, so that you are always, we start something where there's always a little bit of something, as long as it's there, but not if it's not there. And if we have taken money from somewhere, unless it's needed somewhere else, I would be an advocate just out of that principle and good practices of making sure it goes back to where it needs to go, so that we set that precedent. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, yep, sounds good. Jennifer, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, so exactly. This permanent fund money it's not there for us to use like that. I mean, I think we're getting away from that. It's supposed to be used for one specific purpose, but it's been borrowed from. And even now we're having trouble putting that money back. I don't think we need to be thinking of, oh, let's fix the meters in the boat haul out because we did, it needs to be like well, not that the harbor kiosk is an emergency, but I mean, we shouldn't be borrowing money from that at all. That money is for one specific purpose, whether it's in AMLIP or whether it's in Charles Schwab. I mean, I know we've been using it as emergency funds, but we need to not be looking forward to, well, maybe we could use it for this, or maybe we could use it for this, when that needs to be a whole separate pool of money, whatever you want to call it. I don't think we need to be thinking of those projects with this money, if that is why we are thinking of not putting it in. I mean, I'm still fine with not putting anything into it. I think that's a smart move, but I don't think we need to be looking to other projects with this money, because that's not what it's for, no matter where it's sitting. We borrowed it for these kiosks and we still can't even put it back. I don't think we need to be thinking that way. I think we can't forget what that money is set aside for.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Okay, yep.
that's why I brought up what I brought up, because that money is supposed to be used for one specific thing. It probably should have never been used in the past for what it was used for and then not returned. So I'm glad Jennifer brought that up, because of the 30,000, we are returning it to what? What are we returning it to?
Thank you. If I could,
Sorry, it's supposed to go back to the permanent fund account.
Yeah, but the permanent fund account is split. That's why it's fine that it still goes into AMLIP.
Right. But aren't we restricted to use that money from the permanent fund in the AMLIT account for a certain thing?
through the mayor?
Technically, yes. Go ahead. Heidi.
So it is restricted for land acquisition and development and sale. So I guess in that way, if there was, for like the kiosks and the development of that, the funds, and I may be wrong on this, but from my understanding, with my time here at the city, the funds that have been borrowed over the years and then are supposed to be returned have not been from the permanent fund, which is why the permanent fund is still sitting at the 540,000, which was the original amount that was put into the account, and had some growth, and it was not from the principal, it was from the AMLIP, from the interest that was on top of it. So this 41,000 is directly tied into the Seldovia permanent fund, which is what it was dedicated by resolution. If you look in here, I did put that paperwork in here. Formally recognizing, so resolution 2210, page 29, formally recognizes the Seldovia permanent fund principal balance of $540,144 and authorizes the opening of a second account for the Seldovia permanent fund and a third account for the American Rescue Plan. And then you can see here in the whereas, it says at a later date, the city of Seldovia needs to repay the Seldovia permanent fund 30,000, which was used to fund the harbor kiosk project. So Councilmember Swick, thank you for bringing that up. Those are dedicated funds and they are in our code, our municipal code under, I think it's title 14. And I can pull that out for you guys if you want to view it. We do have it in the room about what it can and cannot be used for. But as Councilmember Keithley said, I do like the idea of at least talking about reserves and buckets for some of our other funds like the MMR. There are cases where, it needs to be utilized, and we're seeing that more and more, as Councilmember Kennedy brought up. And then certainly something that hasn't been discussed, but I would like to mention is that we are applying for a lot of grants, and we have a future of grants, hopefully, in our view, where we will continue to apply for grants over these next couple of years. A lot of these grants are reimbursable grants. So like the CDBG, everything that we're spending now, we're spending out of pocket and then putting back. Not saying that should be from the SBF, but certainly from the MMR and other buckets of money that are in reserve. that's something to consider too, is what that number is that we need to be able to sustainably take care of deferred maintenance. And then also if we are having to match or pay upfront for grant projects, what does that look like? But thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember Swick. You are right, that initial balance is of that 541, and then plus the kiosk is dedicated as a Seldovia permanent fund.
Yeah, so even with that being said, I mean, if it was a difference between, or a matter of default versus using those funds, I'd be in favor of using those funds all day long, right? I
Right.
mean, we're not gonna default.
Right.
But I get it. That's, the permanent fund is supposed to be off limits, not for used, I mean, other than a specific purpose, which we did. So now we've, it's kind of a different way, but we've identified some surplus through new means that we're going to use to pay that back. We'll pay it back. Now, there has been, I don't recall what the amount is, if it's $4 or $5 grand, whatever we've made since inception on those of renting. Does anyone recall what we've made on
I thought it was,
the kiosk?
I thought it was
It
$4,000.
was about 4,000, Heidi, somewhere in there.
Mayor Campbell, Jen and Bobby are absolutely right on the funds for our permanent fund. They're absolutely right. My thing is, I'm just daydreaming where we're gonna be 3 years from now, when in fact we find out that this VPSO is in fact gonna work out. And what are we gonna do with the additional funds, that we can maybe save? But I completely agree. It's pretty well written what we gotta do. So we owe that permanent fund, 70-some thousand bucks. With the 40 that's in the other savings, if we were to take that 40 and the 30.
Well, it's still permanent. fund.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's still permanent fund.
No, I
It's-
get that. It's
yeah.
still in the fund, but I mean.
So we only owe it 30 technically.
Right, we owe it 30, but you'd have, if to make it all one, you'd have to move 70 some over.
Yeah, I'm agreed, but there was no provision that said it's all gonna be one. I mean, it's just the total dollars.
So
in
it
the-
doesn't say whether it has to be in one or the other.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I think it's just the dollars, the minimum dollars have to be there in the aggregate, so.
Right,
But the bottom line is, I mean, then if we got that, let's just say we pay back the 30, that takes it up to 72. And if we can make some additions into that over the next year or two and hit a magic number, let's just call it 100, right?
right.
Say we'd like to have 100 in there, then anything in the future goes, that if we had it identified at the end of budget fiscal year as a surplus and we wanted to put it in there, and we would put that, just add up into the balance of
Right.
the Charles Schwab account. And then in the future, if another opportunity did present, I mean, the money's there for a specific use, right? Something comes up, things change, times change, lands change. There's an opportunity to use that. I mean, the first fund balance that would be available to us without a big hit to our portfolio would be the 100 that would be sitting in the AMLIP versus,
Right.
and it would be used for its intended purpose. So just like we did before, we use it for, theoretically for somewhat of its intended purpose. So,
Yes, and that is Title 12, and that's 12.04060 principal. A fund principal may only be appropriated for land acquisition.
land acquisition. Okay.
And we've seen that in the past. There are
Right.
quite a few ordinances, not recently. but
Now, let me throw this
in
out. That's
previous
an ordinance, right?
Mhm.
So that can be changed by a vote of the council.
I think there's more to it because of the way that the funds were received. They were received 500,000 from Seldovia Native Association, and let me check. The first deposit to the fund shall be the 500,000 that the city received from the Seldovia Native Association for the INCSA 14C3 settlement, and I'm pretty sure it's part of that settlement, but we can look into that
Okay.
further.
No, and I'm not. I'm
That's
not
how the funds be used.
Implying that we use it for, other things other than its intended purpose, but maybe there's some latitude with that. I mean, obviously,
Well,
whatever we did, and other councils before us have done.
oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's the principal. The 500,000 is the principal, and now we've dedicated 541,000 as
Okay.
the principal with the knowledge in the resolution that we're also gonna put another 30,000 back into it.
Right.
But anything above that principal amount, the interest that's made, that's when you can have that discussion with Charles Schwab or AMLIP or through the city of what are you doing with the interest, not the principal.
And that would be available to use at council's discretion if we wanted to.
I believe so, yes. That's what I was trying to say. That's what's been done in the past, is that's why the principal's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. But that interest has been utilized in the past for purchasing a loader, roof repairs at the city office. We do have ordinances that track a lot of these big purchases, and I can pull those up if that helps the council get their wrap their minds around what some of those expenses have been, but that's been from the interest of the account, not the
Okay.
principal.
So then ideally, I mean, it's all goes back. I mean, what we're all saying here is correct, right? I mean, if you've got the interest to play with and that amount is identified and that we're playing with a portion of that down in the AMLIP, or the majority of it in the AMLIP account, then everyone here knows it takes money to make money, right? So, and when I say that, that's with some latitude, because obviously we're not trying to make money, we're trying to pay our bills. But if opportunities present themselves to put the city in a better financial position, then we, like just exactly what you were saying earlier, John, that we need to look at those. So your mic.
Thinking two or three other things too.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm certainly not advocating spending any principal there or even any of the interest for now. I would love to see us leave it there for 10 years and then let's see where we're at. But there's a lot of deferred maintenance around here, you know? And anyway, well, what time's our meeting over here tonight?
It
Pretty
looks
much.
like we'll have some other funds available maybe to help us out on that
But-
as well.
But for example, this week, I had a business owner come to me about, you know, why can't they rent a space out at the park and I know why, okay? But, you know, our campground out there, if we had the well fixed and, you know, maybe a couple of sites with water and sewer down the road, you know, 15 years from now, that might be more attractive for people to come and spend time here in the summer, you know, like they do in Homer, you know? But it's all thoughts that, you know, can't happen if you don't save the money first.
For a rainy day. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're headed in the right direction here, so. Anything else, Jennifer or Harmony, before we wrap it up here? Anyone in the room? Anything else? Good. All right, Heidi, any closing items from you?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right, and we don't have any additional audience in for to talk on item C, so we'll skip that. And then yeah, we'll go ahead and it's 10 after 5. We'll go ahead and adjourn and then come back at 6 o'clock for our regular meeting. All right, we'll go and adjourn. Thanks.